Hi everyone, this is Robert and welcome to IDG Live. Today we're looking at the Isle of Faces, which is sort of the next stop really on a rather long series now of mysteries in the world of Ice and Fire. So we've been working our way across quite a few different places, and it just suddenly struck me. I don't think we've actually ever technically covered the Isle of Faces, which is one of the most central mysteries in all of this world. We will rectify that today. As always, I will be taking questions from the chat as I go through. I've got a whole load of questions from my patrons. I'll also start with a little bit of an overview so we're all on the same page. In case you're wondering, if you're watching this live, House of the Dragon. That's this summer. Night of the Seven Kingdoms, episode 1, did come out a few days ago. I will be doing a sort of a pre-recorded Q&A video, which I'm hoping to release tomorrow on this channel. So that's where we'll be talking mostly about that. I can obviously take some questions about that here later if you want, but today we're mostly going to be focusing in on the Isle of Faces. But United Seven Kingdoms, I loved it. It's the short version. I thought it was fantastic. Everything I'd really hoped for. A couple of things I hadn't hoped for, but a lot that was there to be liked. So I'll cover that one in the other video. But for now, let's talk about the Isle of Faces. So, geography first. This is an island in the middle of the God's Eye Lake. The God's Eye Lake is the largest lake in all of Westeros, and it is sort of central in the southern bit of Westeros, in the southeast of the Riverlands. We're not given a huge amount of description of the Isle of Faces. We never visit there in any POV chapters in A Song of Ice and Fire. We've not been there in Dunk and Egg. It gets a few odd mentions in The World of Ice and Fire and Fire and Blood, but we've not actually been there other than a few passed down stories. We've not been there. So as a physical description, we don't know huge amounts about it. It is said to be small. It is said to have a lot of weirwood trees. It is said to have the green men on there. More about them in just one moment. And that's pretty much it. Where this first makes an appearance in the history of this world is as one of two possible places, the other being Moat Cailin, that the Children of the Forest cast the Hammer of the Waters spell, that hugely powerful spell, we're told, which broke the land bridge between southern Westeros and southern Essos, and leaving the Stepstones. Now, perhaps they cast it twice, perhaps this is just different versions of legends coming down to us, we don't know, but clearly this was an important place even then in some way that we do not know. And when the long war between humanity and the Children of the Forest was ended with the Pact, again, this is back in legendary times, we're told that the Pact was signed and sealed effectively on the Isle of Faces. And that perhaps is when it got its name, because the Children of the Forest, in order to celebrate this, in order for the weirwood trees to witness this pact, they carved faces into the weirwood trees there so that the weirwood trees could see this agreement, this pact. That seems to have been the start of this tradition of carving faces into the weirwood trees. So this is an important moment for the developing religion, if that's the right word, of the old gods, and an important moment for the history of the confrontation between humanity and the Children of the Forest. And it became sacred. That's the word that we hear used a couple of times. This was viewed then as a sacred isle. And the Order of the Green Men was established to tend to the weirwood trees and to protect the isle. We're not told much about who this Order of the Green Men might be. We have some odd random descriptions. Let's see whether I've got one here. We can... I should have brought this one up a little bit beforehand. But we've got the World of Ice and Fire has this little section here that this is what we have. Whether the green men still survive on that isle is not clear, although there is the occasional account of some foolhardy young river lord taking a boat to the isle and catching sight of them before winds rise up or a flock of ravens drives him away. The nursery tales claiming that they are horned and have dark green skin is a corruption of the likely truth, which is that the green men wore green garments and horned headdresses. So this idea that they're green in some way, hence green men, and there's some sort of horns on heads thing going on. That bit seems reasonably clear. What is not 100% clear is that because their skin is green, or they just wear green, or do they actually have horns coming out of their heads, or is this just like they have a hat with horns coming out of it? We don't know. And because of the fact that we've never actually been there, and in fact only two named characters who we will come on to in a moment have, to the best of our knowledge, been there, this remains a mystery. And George R. R. Martin has set this up as a huge mystery. We'll come back to this point a little bit later, but it's mentioned a few times in book one, and then things go a little bit quiet. The clear implication is that this was one of, when he started writing, he thought he was writing a trilogy. So there's a lot of things he sort of like packed into this first book that when it became apparent that this was actually going to stretch out into a much longer series, he could slowly drip feed this information in rather than sort of pushing it all out at once. So it gets a few mentions quite early on, and then quite a bit less later on. But in terms of history, it seems to have largely, for the next few thousand years, remained untouched, which was actually quite significant because, particularly when we get the Andal invasion, they came and swept across Westeros over the course of centuries. This has to be said. The Andal invasion was not a classical invasion as you might conceptualize it. It was more a sort of um, an armed long immigration, if that kind of makes sense. That was the sort of way of it, but it sort of swept its way across the continent. And they would often be getting rid of the old religion to replace it with their religion, which was the Faith of the Seven. And in order to do that, they often chopped down weirwood trees. The Isle of Faces managed to escape that. To the extent that it is one of the few places outside, obviously, when you get Godswoods and you get sort of ceremonial weirwood tree there, then one of the few places we know south of the neck where a significant number of weirwood trees still is. Now, how could this be the case? Well, what we're told is that if anyone tries to reach the Isle of Faces, then first of all, strange winds start to blow them off course. And then currents, there's mysterious currents in the water which are pushing their boat somewhere else. And if that doesn't stop people, then flocks of ravens and birds start coming and dive bombing the boat until you turn around. There are, as we read just a moment ago, there are a few reports that people may have seen these green men when they got close, but that's about all. We do not know what's on there. People have not been there. The Andals, maybe they tried, some of them, to go there, but gave up. It's just not really worth it. This is just a small island in the middle of a rather large lake and not of huge strategic importance. It was sacred, but it wasn't. Nobody was going there. So why would they bother? And so it seems to have survived for a huge period of time. It then gets a rather random mention, and I say random, with the first of these two people who we know of, or think we know of, who visited the island, which was Adam Velaryon. Now, Adam Velaryon, you may remember, he obviously is in House of the Dragon. He's he's a dragon rider of sea smoke, and he, towards the end of the Dance of the Dragons, he's in this awkward position where Rhaenyra decides some of the dragon seeds have turned on her, and she decides all of the dragon seeds are therefore under suspicion. She orders him to be arrested. He, however, gets tipped off about this and manages to escape on his dragon. So he's out there on Team Black's side, on Rhaenyra's side. However, she no longer supported him. He, we're told, headed off around the Riverlands, gathered an army from loyalist castles, and headed down to Tumbleton, where there was, at the time, it's pretty horrific going on there, but that's where there were a lot of dragons. This is where the last biggest battle was going on at that time in the war. Strategically, we don't need to labour this point too much, but strategically within the Dance of the Dragons, obviously there have been lots of battles going on all over the place, but the big issue, as far as the big hope, as far as Team Green were concerned, was they had an army coming up from Old Town, heading towards King's Landing, and it was headed up by a dragon, Prince Theron on Tessarion. That was the last. There was Vhagar, of course, but Aemond was doing his own thing with Vhagar in and around Harrenhal. And this army, though, which was coming up from the southwest towards King's Landing, had been stopped in its tracks at Tumbleton. And that's where Adam Velaryon goes. Now, we're told that in this period of time, while he's gathering these armies, perhaps before he started gathering these armies, he flew to the Isle of Faces, landed, took counsel from the Green Men, and then headed off on his way. He that gathered together this army. They go down to Tumbleton. He gets into a battle with some other dragons. We will talk about him a little bit more in a moment. Do not worry. And he dies, as do all of those dragons. So we never find out whether he did. We're not told 100% that he did do. This was just a legend that perhaps he had done. If so, why had he gone there? He's not at any point before that in the story that we know been given a particular link across to the worship of the old gods or anything along those lines. So this seems like quite a random place for him to go. It is interesting. It is a place where you might want to go if you're just interested in the world, but this was in the middle of a civil war, so just a little tourist trip doesn't seem likely. It's all, and if they did advise him, their advice led to his death, so it's all a little bit confusing. But he's one of two people we know of. The second, if we're moving forward through time, is Howland Reed. Howland Reed went and visited there. He made his way down from the neck, paddled his way there in a little sort of coracle, through the God's Eye Lake, landed on the Isle of Faces. Seemingly they must have allowed him to, and he spent some time there. And when we say spend some time, it's not 100% clear. I think the word was a season, but you know what seasons are like. It probably he was there for the winter, which was probably 2 or 3 years. And during that time, he was presumably trained up, conversed with the Green Men, and then he heads off, coincidentally, almost certainly not coincidentally, at the time that the tourney at Harrenhal takes place. And his presence is the presence that kickstarts a huge amount of what actually happens there behind the scenes. Now, however you interpret what's going on with the Knight of the Laughing Tree and Rhaegar and things like that, it was him getting beaten up by some squires that prompted Lyanna to jump to his rescue, and this sense of indignation in her and in some others that a wrong had to be righted the Knight of the Laughing Tree, arrives and makes the knights of those squires basically apologise. That's apologising for what happened to Howland Reed. Now, my interpretation, I'm not going to go into all of the details here, I've said this on several other occasions, my interpretation of what had happened was that Lyanna was the Knight of the Laughing Tree. Rhaegar is sent by his father to find out the identity of the Knight of the Laughing Tree. It wouldn't have been that hard to find out. Where did that horse come from? Whose armor was this? Those kinds of questions you can ask. And it would have led him to her. This is how they met. So Howland's, I think in almost any way you look at this, Howland's arrival triggered the meeting of Rhaegar and Lyanna. So for the second time, a person going to the other faces when they leave leads to something really quite significant happening. 3 dragons dead was what happened after Adam Velaryon was there, when dragons were dwindling already, and then Howland Reed prompting the Rhaegar and Lyanna thing. After that, nothing. It's all quiet. We don't really know. It gets mentioned a few times. When I said it gets mentioned a few times in book 1, I think it's 4 times it gets mentioned in book 1. Each time, it's a sort of it's almost a passing reference, but it's often people who are sort of mentioning important things or places. Like, for example, Dany was just sort of saying, "Oh, Viserys has told me about the delights of Westeros," and then lists 4 or 5 places, of which the Isle of Faces is one, which for a small island in a lake that no one's really been to, seem to give it more significance than you might otherwise think. Catelyn thinks about the Isle of Faces and the Green Men. So there's that's it's almost as if George Martin was just sort of dropping mentions of this in. We don't get to see it in any of the other books. Arya kind of skirts around the outside of the God's Eye Lake at one point, and but we don't really get a sighting of the Isle of Faces, so to speak. It's worth noting, I think, that the God's Eye Lake is big. And when I say big, it's the biggest in Westeros. It's, we're told, well, we're not told specifically, but based on what George R. Martin has said and based on the maps that he's approved, it's about 100 miles long by about 75 miles wide, which is 150, 160 kilometers long. This is a big lake. It's not quite, but nearly like an inland sea. This is the kind of thing where you stand at one end, you cannot see the far end of this lake. If the Isle of Faces is a small island and it is in the middle of that lake, then you're looking at something 30 miles away or more. And probably, although, I mean, the image I've got behind me, this is from House of the Dragon. I was as excited as anyone else to get this random view of the Isle of Faces in House of the Dragon. They put that island quite close to Harrenhal. The reality is, if it's in the middle of this lake, and if this lake is 100 miles long, that means it's going to be 50 miles away. You're not going to be able to see it if you're on the shore. The vast majority of people, they might have heard that there's an island in the middle of this lake, but I've never seen it, never got anywhere near it. Why would you? So that's I think the sort of the first thing is that it's just, although it's mentioned and it's quite big in our minds and it's clearly there's mystery going on there, as far as the average everyday people in Westeros are concerned, it's not somewhere they've ever seen or certainly never been to. It's not somewhere that anyone they know has ever been close to either. It's just not visible. So that, I think, is the concept we have to have in our minds. This isn't forefront. It's not like, oh, you can see there's Casterly Rock. You can see that from miles away. You couldn't see this. Okay, let's go to some questions in the chat. Michael Trainer saying, not related to the Isle of Faces, but I'm wondering about the lore behind folks nailing pennies to a tree in Penny Tree. What information do we have about this tradition? What are your theories? We don't really have a background to this. Um, I I mean, I have a sort of a half-baked theory, which I do wonder whether or not we might get some hints in Night of the Seven Kingdoms. You may have noticed actually in episode 1 when Dunk is proudly going around showing off Sir Arlan's sword, he's got a penny in the pommel, um, showing he's from Pennytree. I do wonder that where Pennytree is in this kind of disputed land between the Bracken lands and the Blackwood lands. I do wonder whether there's some kind of history here that we're going to discover about um, uh, there's a penny rent or something like that that has to be paid and it's put onto a tree. I wonder whether it's going to turn out to be something like that. I don't think it's going to turn out to be hugely significant. I don't think. I did wonder when I was in the middle of a live stream about 6 months or so ago, I did sort of wonder out loud whether that might be connected to the Dunk and Egg story, where they're going to go to that sort of part of the world. If they're in that part of the world, Dunk will want to go to Pennytree. That there's not much of a doubt about that, I think. And various other bits of information we have uh, in A Song of Ice and Fire suggests some new sort of new lines being drawn on a map or something like that happened about that time, which is almost certainly what happens when Dunk and Egg get there. I suspect it's not connected to that. I was thinking out loud about that at the time. It was pointed out to me that it was already known as Pennytree before that time. So whatever the cause of this Pennytree is, for those who don't know, Pennytree it's a small town village which has a tree with pennies just banged into it. So that's it's older than that, but that may have some impact on it in some way. Weirwood Net gifting 5 IDG live memberships. Thank you very much. That's really kind of you. Uh, Membership. I'm going to be redoing all of the memberships and rewards and things like that at some point this year when I get a chance. But the best way to support this channel, if you would like to, is via Patreon. If for whatever reason you don't want to do that, then you can become a member here. What that means in practice is, thank you, that's very kind, but also your name sort of gets highlighted a little bit more in the chat, so it's easier to see when you say stuff. So thank you very much for gifting out those um, channel memberships. I think I had another question here somewhere. Here we go. Ginger Bearded Geek. With George R. R. Martin now abandoning House of the Dragon, can we take any scene of Adam Velaryon and the Isle of Faces as can we take any scene of Adam Velaryon and the Isle of Faces as legitimate? It's an interesting question. So, yeah, if you missed it, I did talk about this a reasonable amount last week, so I'm not going to go over all of the detail. George R. R. Martin did a big interview with James Hibbard. I nearly said James Hetfield. That would have been a very different interview. With James Hibbard in Entertainment Weekly, I think he works for, maybe Hollywood Reporter, one of those. And it was quite wide-ranging. It covered a huge amount of issues. One of the things which came out was the first time that we've had a really clear. We sort of heard the rumours. We've heard little bits and pieces. Really clear his side of what happened with the relationship with Ryan Condal, the showrunner for House of the Dragon, and he basically said it's over. He's not involved in them anymore. There was a sort of a line that says he had been brought back on board, but he wasn't allowed to talk about that, which suggests to me that he's not there in any kind of advisory role, but he probably has agreed something to say he's not going to be bad-mouthing it too much or something along those lines. That would be my guess. I do not know. Pure speculation. But the the fact is, season 1 of House of the Dragon, he was reasonably closely involved. He got shown draft scripts, gave comments and the like. During season 2, that deteriorated. By the time we're at season 3, it's non-existent. He has no interactions with this whatsoever. So, what does that mean for the canonicity of what happens in season 3 and season 4 of House of the Dragon? We've had confirmation it will be 4 seasons. I think we treat it the same way we treat later seasons of Game of Thrones. George R. Martin's been very clear that some changes have been made earlier on, which are going to have butterfly effects, which mean that the story we get at the end, the effects are going to be multiplied, they're going to be a lot bigger. He will have told them earlier on a few of the extra secrets and things behind the scenes, but the story which comes out is going to not be from George. It's going to be based, obviously, based on what George has written in Fire and Blood, but this is going to be from the writing team of House of the Dragon. So I think we treat it as, loose semi-canon, let's put it that way. The fact is, though, that all of this, we have to place all of House of the Dragon, even the first season, which we could put as slightly closer under George's control, as it were. The way Fire and Blood is written is to offer 3 or 4 different possible solutions for what might have happened. It's a history book, an in-world history book, with a maester who's like saying, well, yes, this source says this happened, that source says that happened, I think maybe it was this other thing, and it's up to you as the reader to be interpreting that, deciding what you think fits the facts. And a decision was made early on in this process, when they were adapting the book, that they weren't going to try and do those different possibles. They were going to pick one timeline and go with it. They were going to make decisions on these things. What was the relationship like between young Rhaenyra and Kristen Cole, that kind of thing. They had to make a decision, and they went with that. And the other possible options, they just put to one side. So, in that sense, all of House of the Dragon has always been a semi-canon, because this is just one version of events, not the version of events. It is a version of events. And now we've got a version of events that George R. Martin hasn't himself sort of given the thumbs up to in any way, which is a long-winded way of saying loose semi-canon. Have something else in the chat, I think. Some people call me Morris, suggesting Penny Tree is Penny Lane's sister. It's entirely possible. Yes, question from JK3RSH saying, love to the moderators. Yes, absolutely. If you're watching this live, could you show a little bit of love to the moderators? They are amazing. The reason why the chat is such a wonderful, uplifting place is because they keep it that way. So could you show them a little bit of love? Thank you. In A Dance with Dragons, trees are carved by wildlings Jon has sent south. None are weirwoods. Why is this done? Can green seers see through any tree carved with a face, or only weirwoods? Well, the practice of carving other trees with faces is that's not unique to that. The heart tree in King's Landing is actually an oak tree. It's not a weirwood tree. So you sometimes have an alternative. If you can't go with the weirwood tree, then you have some other tree that's there. That feels to me just like the wildling is kind of like saying, This is us bringing our culture down south. We have faces with trees with faces on, and then we're going to make it like that here now. So that's the kind of feel I've got going on. In terms of the practicality, it is the weirwoods. So when Bran is being taught about this and he eats the weirwood paste, he is told by Bloodraven that he can see out through the eyes of weirwood trees. And in the future, he will be able to move out beyond that. Now, what that implies is the main thing is, yes, the weirwood trees, but he's not going to be restricted to that. He will be able to move out around. And how does that happen? Well, magic. And George R. R. Martin doesn't give us the details of these kinds of things, but perhaps it's other trees are good. They can be a good sort of leaping off point, as it were, for this. George R. R. Martin doesn't like to give us the details of how his magic system works, but that seems a sort of at a high level what's going on there. Right, let's go to actually, lazy ass madman just seeing in the chat saying the copper in pennies tastes like blood. Nailing them to a tree is a politically correct blood offering to the weirwood tree gods. That's a nice thought. I like that one. Let's go to some questions from my patrons. Sean Gartland saying, Merry Thursday, Robert, and to you too. I have to say, on my less charitable days, I find it hard to suspend my disbelief about the Isle of Faces. I appreciate reasons are given as to why you can't get there, but it all just seems like pretty obvious plot armor to me. Old Valyria and the Isle of Faces are the two known locations where people just don't travel to. One was the site of a continent-wide apocalypse, and the other one has wind that pushes you away and annoying seagulls. The equivalency is incongruous, rant over. Yeah, there's you also saying we hope we get to see there. A lot of people saying we get to see them in the books. I don't have a problem with this for a number of reasons. The first, what I was trying to explain a little bit earlier about the size of this isn't a thing that is there. You can see it and go, I really want to go there. Almost certainly from any shore, almost any shore of the God's Eye Lake, you can't see the island. So it's not like it's there and you wonder, I desperately want to go. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that it's not as if there's some great treasure or something that is supposed to be there. Valyria, there was so much lost magic, lost treasures, lost everything, lost knowledge that was there that would draw people to there. And it's not that they can't get there; it's they get there, but they don't come back. So that's a difference between the two of them. And then thirdly, thirdly, I suppose out of four, let's say, it is sacred. That's the word which is used of it quite a few times. So most of the time, people simply won't go there. It's just not a place you go to. This is sacred to the whole God's religion. It's just not a place you would go to. And then finally, if we get past this idea that this is a lake and think of it closer to an inland sea, and how are you actually going to get to it? You're not going to swim. You're not going to swim 50 miles to whatever that is, in 80 kilometers or something. You're not going to. So the only way you're going to get there, in the absence of dragons, is on a boat. And there aren't too many massive boats in that lake, because it is an inland lake, and what are you doing? You're just trying to get to the other side. So there will be some boats around there, but not a huge amount. And if you are going to be trying to get on a boat and go there, then what are you going to build? A particularly impressive? You're going to build up a set of a boatyard. It would be quite the effort to get there. And when you're imagining this is such a big lake that you will barely be able to see either shore. You probably wouldn't be able to see either shore once you're getting close to the Isle. Then actually what that means is, yes, there will be currents and tides and winds and things which would be able to blow you off route. So it actually kind of makes sense. People wouldn't be going there. There's no particular reason for them to be going there. The only way to get there is by a boat. And so, as we all know, boats in that time, yes, they were at the mercy of the elements. Taylor Jones, do you think the Isle was important before the war between the children and the First Men, or do you think its importance started with the Pact and being one of the places being untouched by the First Men, targeting the weirwoods and being presumably the last remaining grove? So it's not clear because of the fact that this is all lost in the mists of time. We don't have all the details. A lot of fans, and we often say this in just like an offhand way, as if, oh, of course it is. It's the hub of the Weirwood network, and that does kind of make sense. It's often described as being the central point of Westeros, and the Weirwood network, in a very real sense, sort of is an expression of Westeros. It's the memory of Westeros through the memory of the trees. And this seems to be a great concentration of weirwood trees in one place. Uh, the fact that this is one of a couple of possible places where the Hammer of the Waters was cast from seems to imply that this must have been significant even then. However, the fact that they made big changes to it because of the pact seems to imply that the pact happening there was the thing which elevated it in many ways to what it is now. They carved the faces on the trees. They established the Order of the Green Men. The Order of the Green Men was not there before the pact, so it wasn't like they had this. I was going to say standing army. I think army is probably overstating it, but they didn't have this dedicated group of people or whatever they are. Don't worry, we'll get onto the Green Men in a moment. They're defending this island before, so it may well have been significant, but not as significant. Orion's Orcas saying, "Hi Robert, why has George R. Martin left the Isle of Faces so mysterious? I have a feeling many important things have happened there. Do you think a future new pact will be agreed upon there in the end? And will Howland Reed be a part of it once again?" And you say Howland and the Isle are a mystery, but connected in some way. Yeah, I agree. They are connected. Howland went there, one of only two people we know who went there. Why has he kept it a mystery? I think because this has to be something which is going to be important at the end. Now, how is this going to be important at the end? There are a couple of, I think, reasonably obvious reasons or possibilities. One is something which has been speculated before, which was this was where Rhaegar and Lyanna got married. Now, that's quite a leap to say that that's what happened, but Harrenhal, they met up again just near Harrenhal. There's a fair chance that if they did get married, we're not saying they definitely did, but if they did get married, Lyanna would want a marriage before a weirwood tree, and there aren't many places with weirwood trees down in the south, so that would kind of make sense. And perhaps Bran could look out through the eyes of the weirwood trees there and see it happening in the past. So that's one thing that could possibly be there. Another thing is that this could possibly be, as we say, the hub, the heart of the weirwood network. Possibly even where the original magic which brought the others into being in some way happened. So that's the second, is that this is a historically important thing. The third is that this is going to be important in the future, because this is going to be where that magic is going to be undone, or something along those lines. The idea of a new pact, I kind of like, but the fact is that if it's a pact between the children and humanity, the children, there aren't many of them left. So the idea of needing a pact is not really there, I don't think. Corvus Codex. Good evening, Robert, Dan, and all. My question is if the Isle of Faces is going to end up as a dropped plot line. There hasn't been a lot of references to it in later books, and I tend to forget it exists while reading it. So I can't categorically say no. George R. Martin is a Gardner writer. He does shift things around and change things. He clearly set this up. I mentioned that he set this up with a few mentions in the first half of the first book, implying this would become important. Then it does go quiet. We get, so in terms of just mentions of the Isle of Faces, there are 11 in A Song of Ice and Fire. The first 4 of them are these mentions that I've already given you in the first book. Then the next 6 are part of Maura and Jodryn telling Bran the story of Howland Reed. And what was their father and what happened there. And then the final one is just a random mention, or John thinks about it. Somebody he knows had this thought of they were going to go to the Isle of Faces and see the Green Men. One of a number of different things. It wasn't lingered on. It didn't seem particularly important, just a sort of like a broader world-building thing. So the idea that this was important and then got dropped, you can't completely rule it out, because the only mention, the short version of what I just said, is that after those early mentions, the only mention we have of it is the Howland Reed one, telling the story of what happened to Howland Reed. There's not been any other particular mentions that imply that this is going to be important. So we can't completely rule it out. But I think given the amount of weirwood trees there and the importance of weirwood trees to this, it has to have some role. I'm pretty sure about that. Two River says a Great Lake-sized lake. I don't know the size of the Great Lakes, but that's the kind of feel. This is, we're not just talking like you go to a park and there's a lake in the park kind of thing. This is the kind of thing that you could be walking along the shore for days before you get anywhere near the other end. Weirwood Net saying we could do with emojis for the members on YouTube, especially Bloodraven. Oh yeah, that's a thing. That is a thing you can do. I'll try and remember that. As I say, one of the things I will be doing at some point this year is trying to sort of upgrade the member offer, if that's the right way of putting it. And yeah, if this is exactly the kind of thing that a Bloodraven emoji, if we can come up with that, that would be fantastic. Let's go to. And people are confirming, yes, this is Great Lake sized. So there, if that helps you kind of visualize it, that's what we're talking about. And as Carl Carstnack says, you're not swimming anywhere in that. I mean, this is one of the things, to say, as much as I loved this image that we've got here from House of the Dragon, I think it did give the wrong impression of how close it is to the shore, making you think that maybe you could, maybe you could just nip over there. If you're a strong swimmer, you can get there kind of thing. No, this is not. This is somewhere off in the middle. You would not see it. Let's go to a question from Lady Pushkins saying, will we see the Isle of Faces in the books? And a few people asked different versions of this, so it's okay. I'll put these together. Dominic Vaughan asks, do you think we'll get a POV or Bran flashback of anyone going to the Isle of Faces? So a friend said, surely George wouldn't finish the story without us seeing the Isle of Faces through at least one POV. Bran's the most obvious, but who else do you think might be allowed to visit? So Steve the O is saying, in terms of the characters who are likely to go there, Bran perhaps, But what about Dany or Jon or Melisandre, although she might want to burn it? Yeah, so will we get to see this? Personally, I think the answer is yes. And I think a couple of people have mentioned Bran. I think that is the most obvious way that we will first get to see this, through him accessing through the Weirwood network. Now, what are we going to see? Perhaps we'll see the Pact. Perhaps if there was some great magic that in some way brought about the others in the first place, that might have happened there. That would be a thing. He obviously on the show he saw the creation of the first White Walker. So that's a possibility. If we did get, as I speculated a bit ago, if we did get this wedding between Rhaegar and Lyanna, perhaps he could see that. So there are a number of different possibilities for how we might get to see it through Bran's eyes. Then the other possibility that a number of people have talked about is this idea that you have to undo the magic that created the others. And in order to do that, you have to be in a particularly magical place in some way. And the Isle of Faces would seem to be the most obvious place, in which case you might find that we do get some characters going there who are kind of welcomed there by the Green Men. Also, you have to have this clear idea that if you've got dragons, you could land on it. It's so I wouldn't 100% rule out Dany landing on there. It would be quite the chapter, but and why she would choose to go there is a different matter again. But she's on a dragon, and the magic of the Green Men. Yes, there might be some buffeting winds which make it bad for dragons, but wouldn't Drogon wouldn't be affected by the currents or the tides or anything like that. So yeah, not beyond the realms of possibility. I do also, in my mind, there's one other time that we might see something like this, is that the imagery of two dragons fighting over the gods I like. We've had that a couple of times in the histories of the world of Ice and Fire. And because we've had that, and George R. Martin loves his sort of histories to echo, the idea of there being a dragon, but if there is a dragon battle between, I don't know, Euron and Dany, I'm just making that up. I don't know how we would reach that point in the story, but let's just go with it. If Euron does capture a dragon, the idea of there being a fight there between the two of them, that would be where I would personally, for maximum impact, where I would put it. Added to which, if we're going to go down the Euron route, if he does capture a dragon, what is he wanting to achieve? He's wanting to kill the gods in order to become a god himself. Crazy ambition. If that is his stated aim, at the moment he's working his way around the coast. But if he manages to get a toehold on the mainland, where can he actually kill the gods? Where can he say, that's it, I got rid of the gods? The God's Eye Lake. It's possible. So with somebody who was it was saying come on, so Stevie O was saying Melisandre could potentially burn it down or want to burn it down. So would Euron. Maura Lee, hi there, Maura. Great to see you, and very generous of you as well. Thank you very much. Saying in honor of Bloodraven and IDG Live. Thank you very much. I hugely appreciate that. And class now, more Great Lakes knowledge here. We've got Lake Superior has waves and sinks massive container ships all the time. So there we go. Yeah. Maybe. Oh, who said this? Somebody here was saying. Mark Shear saying maybe the sea snake should have gone there as his final voyage. Maybe that would have been quite fun. Right. Let's go to a question from Catherine Furseth. I'm curious about whether Adam Velaryon, ever actually went to the Isle of Faces. So this is sort of the counter possibility here. In Fire and Blood, we read this. Singers say Sir Adam had flown from King's Landing to the God's Eye, where he landed on the sacred Isle of Faces and took counsel with the Green Men. The scholar must confine himself to known fact, and what we know is that Sir Adam flew far and fast, descending on castles great and small whose lords were loyal to the Queen, to piece together an army. Now, Catherine goes on to say, to me, saying that the singers say or sing something isn't really proof. Of course, the whole of Fire and Blood is about differences in testimonies on a lot of issues, but still, why would he go there at all? He was on a mission to find men for an army, wasn't raised anywhere near anything connected to the old god's religion, so it just feels like a good story that singers would tell, adding romance and heroism to the mysterious reputation of the Isle of Faces. So yeah, this is, as I say, this is the curious thing, is that there's no obvious motive here for him to be going to the Isle of Faces. He's got no background of having any kind of connection with worship of the old gods. He's on a mission. He's in a rush. Why would he go off to somewhere where nobody he knows has ever been there, where allegedly there are some powerful people, but they clearly keep themselves to themselves? Why would he do this? It does indeed, as you say, sound like the kind of thing that the singers would add in just to make it a better tale. So I think George R. Martin has probably left it to us to go with what we ourselves think. And I would well, in the absence of anything else, I would say, yeah, you're probably right. This does sound a little bit weird. It would sound weirder that at no point while dragons were around did any Targaryen ever land on the Isle of Faces. That, for me, feels even weirder. Why did Aegon never bother just to check it out, see what was going on there? That does sound kind of weird. But so the idea that a Targaryen, Velaryon, did land their dragon on there in and of itself isn't a mystery. It's why him and why then. That's the bit that sounds a little bit curious. And so I would be tempted to sort of just put this one down as just a nice story. But for one weird detail that I can't quite sort of explain other than just sort of note it there as that's a weird detail. We're told that Adam Velaryon's bones, after he died, were carried up to Raventree Hall and kept there until much later when they were then returned to Driftmark. That is a really weird thing. This was, if you read the descriptions of Tumbleton, this was just hell on earth. It was horrible. So the idea that somebody would go in and find somebody's bones and sort of amidst all of this carnage, there are literal dragons dropping dead on the battlefield here. The idea that any would, during this time, deliberately save this one person's bones is a bit odd. And the fact that they go to the biggest old gods worshipping family in the entire South adds an extra layer to this. If he had been to the Isle of Faces, then is there something there that they were trying to take from him, rescue from him, give his memories? Did they want to give his memories in some way back to the Weirwood tree? I don't know. But it's just an odd little detail that we just have to sort of lodge at the back of our brain just to go, well, that feels strange. Let's go to a question from Ms. Fox in Arda, do you think King Bran could rule Westeros from a seat at the Isle of Faces instead of King's Landing? Could Adam Velaryon and Seasmoke landing in the Isle of Faces somehow bridge the link between Dragon and Green Dreams? Having a dragon or Valyrian magic on a magical nexus like the Isle of Faces has to mean something, right? Why do you think Jaehaerys and Alicent didn't go to the Isle of Faces? So um, then there's legend that dragons were native to Westeros. I wonder if the children of the forest were responsible for getting rid of them. Seems like a high security risk to have fire-breathing dragons loose in a tree-dependent magic system. So there's a lot in there. But to pick off a couple of these ones, in terms of King Bran, I think we'll probably come back to this in a later question. Could King Bran rule Westeros from a seat at the Isle of Faces instead of King's Landing? I think I like this thematically, but not practically. If we go down the route that Bran is going to rule the Seven Kingdoms at the end of all of this, then he has to, in some way, be seen to be ruling. And it, would him sitting in the Isle of Faces be a good way to be the visible king? No, not at all. Would the green men and the children of the forest be happy for lots of people to be traipsing on and off of their island just to be talking to the king? I suspect, again, the answer is no. So, although, yes, I like this idea theoretically, symbolically, the reality is that the king, I think, has to not be on an island many miles from the shore. They have to be sat there. I mean, otherwise they would have stayed on Dragonstone. They have to be there somewhere on the mainland, and the obvious place is King's Landing. The observation about the children of the forest wanting to get rid of dragons is an intriguing one because, and the reason why I wanted to answer this question after the Adam Velaryon one was you have to, if you accept the fact Adam Velaryon went and got advice from the children, from the Green Men, and the Green Men, in some way, they then wanted him to do what was part of their plan. What happened? He gathered an army, yes. He headed down, and then 3 dragons died. So, because of his actions. If he did talk to the Green Men and he did follow through with exactly what the Green Men were suggesting, the end result of that is dragons dying. Is that what the Children of the Forest, what the Weirwood Network wants? I suspect not in the longer term, because dragons will be very useful against the army of the dead. But perhaps in the short term, perhaps they did indeed see the danger of there being too many dragons. Because we have to remember that at the moment of the Dance of the Dragons, we started out with, I think it's 20 dragons, and they were being dragons were hatching, dragon eggs were hatching regularly. The idea was very clear that the number of dragons was only going to increase over time. And it's one thing having 1, 2, 3 dragons in Westeros. The idea of there being 20, 30, 40 dragons in Westeros, I think would have been a little bit more concerning for them. There's Weirwood. Ravens used to speak the messages. They could again, snow, corn, etc. Why couldn't there be a crow in the small council speaking for Bran, or he could walk somebody? He could. It depends on how sort of like high magic George R. Martin wants to make this. My I don't know. Yes, I guess you could do those things. I mean, I think um, a raven tends to have a sort of a limited vocabulary, um, but the idea of him walking into somebody who could then be presenting his message, yeah. I mean, could happen. Whether people would want that, I don't know. So I think the answer is yes, it's possible. The practicalities of it, and if you go around the practicalities of it in that kind of route through the pure magic one, then that actually becomes quite dark. I think because walking into somebody is taking control of somebody else's body, and that is not a thing which is, in fact, that's an abomination. The skin changer said. Um, let's go to which question? Flame G saying, "Hello, Robert. My question is, how powerful is Howland Reed's magic? He went to the Isle of Faces to seek knowledge and understanding of green magic. What do you think he discovered there? My theory is that he may have seen, either shown by the weirwood trees or the green men or his green dreams, that Lyanna and Rhaegar's son would be the Song of Ice and Fire. I wonder if he had foreseen a scenario where Lyanna and Rhaegar meet up and his role was to bring them both together." Well, I think the answer is yes, although I think this was less from him. I think this was more from the weirwoods themselves. He does not get green dreams. That's cleared up by Jojen, I think it is. Howland Reed does not get green dreams. That's not to say that he doesn't have any powers, but and we'll come back to exactly what they are in a little bit. But it seems quite clear that he was sort of summoned there, and then used as, in my view anyway, as Bloodraven's man on the ground. Bloodraven used to be the person who could influence events on the ground when he was in Westeros. When he went up to the wall and then beyond the wall, hooked up to the Weirwood network, he no longer could be that person on the ground doing the things he needed. So what was he going to do? Well, he uses other people as his tools, as it were. So Howland Reed is summoned there. He's shown what he has to be doing, and then he heads off and does it. So whereas he may not have been specifically there, knowing exactly what, you know, the long term aim of all of this was, he would have been known what his short term mission was. Clary Goski, hi Robert, hope you're well. I am, thank you. What do you think of the idea that Bran is the Knight of the Laughing Tree? Some time traveling shenanigans, perhaps. Um, well, I mean, so there's two elements to this. The first is I think this works so much better if this is Lyanna. Um, it it works in terms of motivations. She clearly is the one at the tourney who's most indignant about what happened to Howland, and that somebody needs to be righting that wrong. She's the driving force in this. We're told all of these things about how good she was as a horsewoman. We're told that the figure was quite small, with a voice that, you know, seemed quite disguised. It works with how she might have met Rhaegar, because otherwise we don't have any meeting between them before he crowned her the Queen of Love and Beauty. It gives a reason why he would have crowned her the Queen of Love and Beauty if he saw her as having been effectively the champion, the undefeated champion in the tourney. So there's a lot going on there that makes it work best for it to be Lyanna. Could Bran theoretically, through some sort of wibbly wobbly timey wimey thing, have been the Knight of the Laughing Tree? Well, that would probably require him to go back in time and then walk into somebody in order to do that, which is not beyond the realms of possibility. But why? It would require that whoever was this knight would have to be a very good horse person. Bran is not. I mean, we see him strapped to a horse, and he's very frustrated. He loves the sense of freedom of being on a horse again, but he's very frustrated about his ability to actually ride horses. So him personally doesn't seem to have the huge experience, and we're never told that he's um, that good at that kind of stuff. But yeah, interesting question. Caius Ballerina, picking up a question. I love it when people do this. Thank you very much. For Peter Lewandowski, what if Bran, in his capacity as the Three-Eyed Raven, went to the Isle? Would that make him more powerful? Well, so as a clarification on the Three-Eyed Raven, this was something they obviously went quite big on in the show. I am the Three-Eyed Raven. In the books, it's the Three-Eyed Crow rather than the Three-Eyed Raven, which is a small difference, but it's quite important because actually that is just that's not a job title. In the way that on the show they seem to imply this was, this was a job title. This was a thing you are. This is a thing you might become. What it was, Bran would be getting his visions, his green dreams, and in that he would encounter a three-eyed crow, and that was who he was going to try and see. And he didn't have a name for this person, so he just referred to them as the three-eyed crow. And how the green dreams seem to work is that you don't appear, you have an avatar, as so to speak, in the green dream. You don't know what you look like, but that is a kind of like an expression of you in some kind of way. So Jojen had a green dream about Bran, and he went to Winterfell not knowing who he was looking for because he didn't have a name. There was no gamer tag above it. What there was this avatar, for want of a better word, of a winged wolf held down by chains. He then went to Winterfell and tried to figure out who could this be. A wolf definitely seems to imply um, a Stark. The idea of being winged, that's a magical thing. So it's somebody who is magical but is being held back. And so that was what Jojen was going to look for. Bran was going to look for somebody who is reflective of being the three-eyed crow. He goes to, when he meets Bloodraven, he basically says, "Are you the three-eyed crow?" And Bloodraven, it takes a moment, and he's like, yeah, that kind of makes sense. Why? Because he's a crow, member of the Night's Watch. The three eyes, his third eye has opened. He is the three-eyed crow. So this is a description of his avatar, not a job title. So that was a very long preamble too. When Bran leaves, the way they did it on the show was basically Bloodraven was killed, but then sort of passed on the mantle to Bran. Bran, you are now the Three-Eyed Raven. You're now a different thing. You've got a different job title. You've been taken over. That kind of, it probably won't be that kind of clear cut in the books. Bran will have got this knowledge passed on to him, but everything that everybody there in that cave has sort of been suggesting so far is they're expecting him to stay there now. He's going to plug himself into the Weirwood network, and he's not going to be moving. And he's going to be one of these green seers. We've had several of them. There are lots of children of the forest green seers who were there, plugged in, and almost dead, in a way that Bloodraven himself over time will slowly sort of decline. Um, Anthony Green saying, I'm a Chicagoan. I've now lost the well, I'm Patreon. Here we go. Yes, I'm a Patreon. I don't know if that's reflected in the YouTube account. It doesn't. Yeah, if you're Patreon, then you don't get automatically highlighted in the YouTube. But Happy to pick up on this. I'm watching it a bit behind with the live chat. Your explanation makes much more sense to me now. I'm a lifelong Chicagoan, Chicago being on one of the Great Lakes. So yeah, good. I'm pleased about that. Um, Bucky Underbelly saying, "Greetings, Robert. Howland Reed is described as quite small in stature. All of uh, the his people." People from the next. I always have a blank every single time. I have a mind blank about something that I say all the time and think about all the time. Anyway, they all are small in stature. Does this mean that he has some children of the forest in his bloodline? Quite possibly. We don't know, but this has long been suspected that maybe there was some intermarriage some way back in the past. But yeah, we don't have a clear family tree for that. Anna Gwen, thank you very much, people. Let's go to do we do Lorelei Dragon. Good evening, Robert. Do we know for certain who the Green Men are? My headcanon is that they're children of the forest, but I can't remember what evidence, if any, led me to think so. Dominic Vaughan similarly saying, "Hi, Robert. Um, who do you think the Green Men actually are? Are they children of the forest or a remnant of the offshoot of the First Men with Greenseer abilities?" So this is um, it's a mystery because of all we've got is this the legends of what they are. This idea maybe they have green skin, maybe they have antlers. Bran at one point thinks, oh, the old Nan told him that they rode on elks. The fact is, this is a small island, um, so there probably can't be too many of them, and they um is the island going to be sufficient to be providing all that they need? Um, Probably not for a huge amount of people, so there probably aren't all that many of them. Are they children of the forest? It's possible. Children of the forest, incidentally, they're described as having sort of often nut brown skin, slightly dappled, so it's not green, obviously green. Um, the antlers thing, children of the forest haven't got antlers. Maybe that's a hat. We don't know. So it is a mystery. Um, but I've got and this I think exists. In my mind, this is halfway between headcanon and tinfoil, um, because it's based on some reasoning out, but also is very speculative because we simply don't have enough information. I wonder if the reason why Bran thinks about the children, about the Green Men, when coming into contact with um, Cold Hands and Cold Hands riding on the elk. I wonder whether this is a hint as to what the nature of the Green Men actually is. This is a small island, a long way from the shore. Now, could it have sustained an island community for thousands of years off of fish, off of what I mean? It seems to be wooded. There don't seem to have farmlanders, as far as we're aware. No particular cultivation going on there. Could they have carried on for all those many hundreds of generations just in this small island? Well, they could. They could. But what if we don't need to worry about the next generation, the next generation, the next generation, because the green men who are there are still the first green men because they are undead, if you like. Now, what do I mean by that is the cold hands idea. The children of the forest clearly have some technology to take somebody who is dead or about to die and then just sort of keep them going. That's what's happening with Cold Hands. We're not told all of the details of that. He is very clearly dead. He doesn't need to. He doesn't need to breathe or eat or anything like that. He's gone. But he's being powered through some magic to keep going. So, if that is a thing they can do, if we're being given the imagery of the Green Men when we came to him, or a reminder of the Green Men's existence when it comes to him, might they have done the same thing in order to protect this island? People who do not, they never need to leave because they don't need to eat, um, they don't need to do anything. We don't need to worry about whether the next generation of them is going to be quite as loyal and good at their job. They don't need to be raising any children. They can have the set number and then just stick with it. So I do wonder whether we're going to find that that is something like what we've got going on here, an equivalent of Cold Hands in some way. Um, Fisher King stuff, says Carl Crossman. Yes, absolutely. Uh, Babylon, this guy sips water at the most annoying times. Well, I do apologise. If it's annoying for you, it's necessary for me, unfortunately. So the what have we got? Somebody said happy belated birthday, Carl Karsnark. In which case, a happy belated birthday to you. Fantastic, a wonderful member of the team here. So let's go to Relaxed Like a Cat. Do you think we will see any children of the forest in the Winds of Winter? There was a scene in the novel where Bran et al. Meet Leaf, who suggested she'd been hiding amongst humanity. Do you think there are any of the characters we've already met that are actually children of the forest in disguise? So, will we meet any children of the forest in the Winds of Winter? Well, obviously, we will have the Children of the Forest tour with Bran will still be there. Will there be any more? In answer to your question, are there any in hiding? I'm pretty sure that the Woods Witch, the Ghost of High Heart, is, if not a child of the forest, she's 3 foot tall. She's got white skin, red eyes. If not a child of the forest, then a half child of the forest, something along those lines. She's very old. Let's not forget. So she's, at the very least, long lived. Now, is there are there going to be any more? Perhaps, yes. It's Leaf did seem to suggest that she managed to sort of go out amongst the humans for a while, perhaps using disguises, or just sticking in forests and observing stuff. We don't really know, but we will meet more the deeper into the story we go. I don't believe that the only children of the forest there are left are those who are in Bloodraven's cave. I suspect there are some more hidden away that we don't. There might even be some underground somewhere. This is the thing that we have to remember: is the places we're told that they enjoy living, Hollow Hills, Crannogs, and places like that. Crannogs implies maybe there's even some in the neck. Hollow Hills, they could be anywhere. They're being discovered in the middle of the deep forest. The deep forests were left to the children of the forest in the pact. So if we get to the deep forests, might there be some in the Wolf's Wood? Might there be some in the King's Wood? Who knows? Cold Hands, Andrew Kay saying Cold Hands could be quite ancient as well, not fully sold on the Raven's Teeth member theories. I mean, that's absolutely fine. That's my working theory. But he could well be very old, yeah. Let's go to a question from Per Marcus Risman. 7 blessings from a chilly north. I find the theory that Brendan, Bloodraven, tried to recruit Euron before Bran really interesting, and I like it. If the Isle is to play a future role, which I feel is at least hinted at, but who knows, do you think Euron will be drawn there as a dark antithesis to Bran, the three-eyed raven? A dark antithesis I like. Yes, he is. So for those who missed the theory, that Euron, um, he sort of mutters about, he had a dream that, could he fly? He sort of mutters about that, and his the symbolism is very crow, that he's one-eyed crow. He's not a three-eyed crow. He's a one-eyed crow. You're on one eye. So the imagery is very similar, and it just the echoes of this are there, and added to which he now is drinking the shade of the evening tree juice, which is a sort of the dark version of the weirwood paste, which seems to have opened his mind to seeing magical things in the future and the like. So, yes, he's being set up as a sort of a dark antithesis to Bran. I would 100% agree with that. I also, as I said a bit earlier, I can very much see the argument. He is there saying, "I am, I am the god. I will reign as god over the Seven Kingdoms." And first, he has to kill all the gods. That will mean destroying the Weirwood network. So he will be wanting to do that. I think that he will be drawn there not to sort of go and seek knowledge or something, but to try to destroy it. So this is where my idea of there being like a dragon battle above the God's Eye really plays out. If he gets a dragon, he would be able to fly there and then be confronted by someone else. So we've already got the one eye kind of Aemond one eye. This character already. We've got the imagery of that with a battle over the God's Eye Lake. So yeah, George R. R. Martin does sometimes lay things down quite heavily. I think that if it happened, we would look back and say, "Oh, there's so much foreshadowing for this." Doesn't mean it's necessarily going to be happening, but the foreshadowing has been set there. Let me just take a moment to say, patrons, thank you. I hugely appreciate what you do. Your support is what allows me to keep going doing this. So thank you so much. The best way to support this channel, if you wish to do so, is down through Patreon. There's a link down there somewhere. I'll be looking to sort of upgrade the offerings there as well this year. So I'll try and draw everything in together, because we're now, if you like the videos on the main channel are now I'm releasing them all, basically the entire back catalogue, are going over onto Spotify if you want to check that out. It's also there. Where else am I putting? Oh, Facebook. I've started putting them up on a variety of different places. So look around. Basically, I'm now expanding out the number of places that you can get Indie Geek videos. So if you find it easier to look there, then do. Facebook, incidentally, I think I'm streaming live on Facebook right now. I haven't yet managed to figure out how well that's going, but I think that means that is should be going live as we speak. What else was I going to say? Videos coming up on the main channel, and on this channel, I will be doing the a Knight of the Seven Kingdoms Q&A. Hopefully that's going to go up tomorrow. And I will see, I'm going to experiment a little bit about trying to extract short form content from the longer form content. A lot of people seem to do this. So I'm going to see whether I can take a few clips out and make shorts out of them. Might be fun. Who knows? We'll see where we go with that. Yeah, I think that's enough advertising for now. I'm sure there are other things I probably should have plugged and said, but that is enough. There's a lot going on, but big plans. I'm excited. James Boris saying, "Hi, Robert. What are the major hypotheses in the community about what Howland learned on the Isle of Faces? Was he intentionally manipulating events with that knowledge, or was he being manipulated?" It's an interesting question. I think he was being used, but he may well have bought into that. So the the fact is that he doesn't seem to be, from what we read, from pun intended, from Mira and Jojen and what they're telling Bran about it. This doesn't come across as a tale of somebody who is hugely bought into um, following prophecy, and we have to identify this, and I have to throw these two people. That's not the story that they're telling to Bran. They're just giving him sort of the bare details, and also, I think, a How I Met Your Mother kind of story. But um, that doesn't mean that he hasn't learned anything. What's very clear is that he does have some magical abilities, but he doesn't get green dreams. So he's not the green seer that they're looking for. But he is somebody who I'm sure they could show him stuff. I'm sure they could train him into things, and persuade him what his role was going to be. And what his role almost certainly, I think, almost certainly was going to be, was getting Rhaegar and Lyanna together and then making sure that their child was protected. Let's go to So, friend saying, Happy Thursday, Robert, and to you too. If the undoing of the magic that brought about the others is to take place on the Isle of Faces, who might be involved? One of the few highlights of season 8 for me was Arya playing such a huge role. What do you think? Best wishes, warmest regards, and to you. So, yeah, the headline here, I think that the magic that created, this is our best working hypothesis, is that the magic that created or brought the others into being in some way has to be undone. I think the best bet for where the magic that created them happened was the Isle of Faces. That seems therefore to be the logical place where it has to be undone. The question I think has to be is, do you need the others there in order to do that? I think probably the answer is yes. And that implies that the others have to come all the way south to around there. The Isle of Faces is one of those islands that we talk about a lot, that we say, is it just a coincidence that so many of these places that seem like they might be important in the battle against the others are islands? The Isle of Faces, Dragonstone, Starfall, and so on. I don't think it is just a coincidence. I think there is a reason for that. The answer to your question, I think, is that Bran has to be involved in some way. The TV show, I always find it hard to sort of like try and interpret what the TV show did in order to try and get to what was going to happen in the books. It's a fool's game. But clearly they wanted Bran to be seen to be an important part of what happened there, even though on the TV show they ended up just having him basically sitting there. He didn't really do much in that battle, just drew the Night King to him because the Night King realized that he was a danger to him. I think that Bran will be more than just bait. I think Bran will play an important part in this. Question from Akeem Wade. Got here late, but what do you think happened to Damon's body? Okay, so interesting. So Damon, he uh, he was on Caraxes fighting Aemond on Vhagar. They fought above the God's Eye Lake. Damon leaped from his saddle, got Aemond, thrust Dark Sister into his eye, killed him. The dragons and everyone crashed down to the ground. So the first thing is that some have speculated that he might have survived. I think the answer to that is no. He fell from a massive height, and into water on top of a dragon, whatever it was, he was just human. He was going to die, but he went out and died in the way that he wanted to. So that's the first thing. I think he did die. What happened to his body? They found Aemon's body. Does that mean they should have found Damon's? Not necessarily. I, uh, by instinct, I think that it um, is just somewhere at the bottom of the God's Eye Lake. It's possible that it washed up on the Isle of Faces. I like this idea on a kind of like a more magic-y sense that this could, yeah, he could have got then and been offered as a sacrifice to the Weirwood Network in some way. There is, increasingly, we're starting to see there is some kind of link. I say we're trying to see, we're spotting things which might hint at the idea that there might be some kind of link between the Targaryen kind of dragon dreams idea and green dreams. And one of the things, even if we leave aside the fact that House of the Dragon season 2 literally had the two coinciding, where Helena seemed to be interrupting a vision through the Weirwood Network. So even leaving that to one side, then we've the similarities between them are quite stark, in that there seems to be an intentionality to most types of magic that is not there in Green Dreams and in Dragon Dreams. They just happen to you, and you can't stop them. You're not trying to do the magic thing. You're not trying to see the future. They just happen. So they seem to be operating on the same principles, if nothing else. And so, yeah, the idea is that perhaps Damon, if he could have been offered as a, we don't know exactly how the magic works. If he could have been offered as a sacrifice to the Weirwood tree in some way, does that mean the Weirwood tree can kind of get his memories in some way? It's possible. SGH saying, if the Stark direwolves name theory is true, might Jon become Azor Ahai by defeating the others at the Isle of Faces, becoming the ghost of Harrenhal? So the Stark direwolves name theory is that each of the Stark children's fate is linked to the name of their direwolf. So Sansa named hers Lady, she will become the Lady of Winterfell. Rickon called his Shaggy Dog because his story is going to be long and winding and actually ultimately not go anywhere like a Shaggy Dog story. The fact of the matter is, Jon having a direwolf called Ghost completely matches this idea that he will die and come back. So that fate seems set. So I don't think we need to find another thing to justify why Jon's direwolf might be called Ghost. As for your idea that he might become Azor Ahai by defeating the others at the Isle of Faces, becoming the ghost of Harrenhal. The Isle of Faces, you may have missed a little bit earlier in the stream. The Isle of Faces, yes, it's in the middle of the God's Eye Lake, and the God's Eye Lake, Harrenhal, is on the shore of the God's Eye Lake. There's, as far as almost certainly, there's about 50 miles, maybe a bit less, from Harrenhal to the Isle of Faces, because the lake itself is like 100 miles long, and the isle is small and in the middle, so it's a long way away. Yes, it's in the same broad vicinity. Don't get me wrong. It's not huge amounts away, but I think it would be incorrect to say that they're literally next door. So you might as well be, connect the one and the other. The Ghost of Harrenhal. Yeah, I mean, I like the idea. Personally, I'm not sure. Paul Whitrock saying, hello, Robert. I was wondering how close you think A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms will stick to the book. We've had some recent interpretation in GOT and Game of Thrones. I'm not sure what you mean by some recent interpretation. I think How close will it stick? I think it will stick very close. And if you've read the story and you've seen the what's coming next trailer, they're telling the story. So I think more what we're going to get is a couple of small tweaks to make it work. One of which, and whether you think these are necessary or not, one of which is so Dunk is he's not as simple. He's innocent, but he's not as simple. And he a lot of his interior monologue we deal with in various ways, talking to the horses, flashbacks, that kind of thing. So there's some sort of slight shifting. He's obviously also older than he was in the books. In the story, he's probably about 16. I don't know how old the actor actually is, but mid to late 20s, I think. So there's a significant difference going on there as well. Leaving them to one side, and they are adding in stuff. So, for example, if you saw episode 1, then the role of Lionel Baratheon has been increased. And with that, you can't really escape the fact that he's a hugely vibrant character, and that this therefore sort of influences our interpretation of how this goes in the story. Then how spoilers in the story, him joining up to sort of on Dunk's side for the trial was a little bit of a surprise, really. Here, it would actually make perfect sense. So there's sort of layers, but broadly speaking, I think they're going to stick pretty close, which I think is good. DZM Daily saying, "Is there a Shade of the Evening version of the Isle of Faces?" Not that we know of. A good question. I mean, with Shade of the Evening, then there's a grove outside the House of the Undying. But no, we don't know of like an island central hub. Greeny, if Damon's body was never found, how has Dark Sister recovered? Would he have not had it with him when killing Aemond? Yes, he did, but he rather graphic, but he took the sword and he just thrust it in, and Aemond's body was discovered with the sword through his eye. So that was where it was. They didn't find Damon's body because Damon was no longer holding the sword. Let's go to a question from Dustin Wilson saying, "Hey Robert, are you familiar with Michael Talks About Stuff's theory about the Isle of Faces being a kind of seed vault for the weirwoods, the last vestige of the uncorrupted trees?" I find it very interesting, and it kind of makes sense as to why it would be protected. So then you sort of go and say, what about the Green Men? They sound kind of wacky. Men with antlers, ancient Storm King connections, related to Cold Hands. Throw us a bone, George. Yeah, he's deliberately keeping that one a mystery. But have I heard about the seed bank, Weirwood seed vault theory? I think somebody recommended this to me before. I have to admit, I didn't know it very well. I haven't seen that video. At least I can't remember seeing that video. The the thing that a lot of people say as shorthand is this is the heart or the hub of the Weirwood network, which kind of works for me. The idea of Weirwood trees are, as far as I'm concerned, Weirwood trees are uncorrupted. The corrupted Weirwood trees are the Shade of the Evening trees. So the uncorrupted ones are the ones that are in Westeros. Let's go to Lady Pushkin saying, hello, Robert. Talking about all things magical, do you think Bran's magic will take a dark turn? For example, bring down the wall, even if this is accidental. In the show, he was touched, which allowed the whites into the cave. Will it be the same in the books, do you think? His warging seems to be turning dark and causing harm, even if he doesn't realize it, and it is unintentional. Well, Dan's Bran's just thinking about my dog. Bran's arc and story is getting dark. There's no doubt about this whatsoever. If you read his chapters, we're kind of cheering him on. We're in his POV, but when you just sort of pause and read the language that's going on, it's particularly the last couple of chapters when he's there with Bloodraven. It's not good. He's already done a couple of things that we're told were an abomination for a skin changer to do. When we get those chapters there with Bloodraven, it's the language usage, it's all darkness, and then it gets punctuated by this phrase: the moon was a crescent, thin and sharp as the blade of a knife. It's supposed to feel sinister. So yeah, he's going down a dark route, and the idea, I think, is that Bloodraven is this ultimate for the greater good kind of figure, and that is playing into Bran, is that he will be using his powers, but without a real morality behind it. Now, Bloodraven, yes, he's teaching him how to use the powers, but he's not. He's not noticing the way that Bran is using them and sort of commenting on how he should or shouldn't do it. And also, he's an old man at this point. He almost, you can see him kind of like drifting in and out and say, well, that's enough for now. I've got to sort of rest for a bit. So yeah, he's not the best mentor Bran could possibly have. As concerning the other bit of your question, whether or not what happened on the show was, you'll remember Bran, he sees the army of the dead, and then the Night King just kind of like grabs him like that and sort of marks him, and the action moves quite fast there. This is the Hodor episode, but it's very clear that what has happened there is that a contact is made between the Night King and Bran, and that meant that the Night King could now cross over the barrier, pass through the barrier which was around the outside of Bloodraven's cave, which was clearly keeping the whites out. And that allowed him past that barrier. Now, I wondered at the time whether that meant that if Bran went on the other side of the wall, given the wall seems to be using the same sort of magical technology as that barrier, did that mean that they could come through because he'd made some kind of connection? So is that going to happen in the books? It has the feel of the kind of thing that maybe they were picking on something George R. R. Martin said and then didn't, sort of only half-heartedly did it. But it's one of those things where we have to, and I don't want to get too sidetracked back to the wall, we have to have some way for the others to get past the wall, for this story to sort of develop. Because if they get to the wall, it's like, oh, we forgot there's a magical barrier we can't cross. Oh well, guys, let's head back. That won't happen. Somehow, and I'm pretty sure George R. Martin will not allow himself to resist the temptation. The wall has to come down in some way, shape, or form. How does that happen? Well, not with them having a dragon. The showrunners were very clear; they made that up. That was their thing. They said we had to think of a way for the wall to come down. which seems to imply that whatever way George R. R. Martin had told them, because he will have told them how the wall comes down, they'd already done things to make sure that that couldn't happen in their world, or they thought that it wouldn't work from a TV perspective. It only would work from a book perspective. So this has to be one of the options, that there is some kind of link with Bran that allows them to cross over, to bring down the wall in some way. Pardon me. I've got another question here. James Bordus, very generous. Thank you very much. Speaking of Howland and R+L, something bothers me about the assumed dialogue before the clash between Ned and Co. and the Kingsguard. Wouldn't Rhaegar tell his bestie what was going on? And I imagine Howland could corroborate things only Rhaegar or Lyanna should know. So the argument that I think you're putting on, argument is probably the wrong. So the question I think you're putting here, if you don't mind me sort of paraphrasing it, is Arthur Dayne was there with the other two members of the Kingsguard, defending the Tower of Joy, and shouldn't Rhaegar have said, okay, so here's the plan. If this happens, then that you need to protect this. But if Ned's there, Ned's not going to be killing Lyanna, obviously. So you need to deal with that. And this is how it all fits together. And then Howland could like pipe up and go, yeah, actually, I know this because of this thing over here. And then let's talk about it, and we'll figure out what we do next. Could that not have happened? It could have done. But I think the missing elements here are, firstly, Rhaegar was convinced he was going to survive. That's quite crucial to this, I think. He was an absolute believer in prophecy. He built his life around following it, and he was absolutely convinced he was going to put down this uprising. We get snapshots of this. He talks to Jaime. He says, when I return, things are going to change. We'll talk then. The idea that he wasn't going to return seems not to have crossed his mind. So any orders he gave to the Kingsguard will not have been, and if I die, this is what you need to be doing, because that thought never crossed his mind. So I think that's the first element. The second element is that we get, when we have this fever dream that Ned has, then most of that fever dream is that conversation when him and his companions reach the Tower of Joy, and then the Kingsguard talk to them. Now, George R. R. Martin has been very clear. We shouldn't take the fever dream as literal truth of exactly what happened. This is more of a feel. And what is the feel that we've got of that conversation? This is Ned saying, well, I was expecting to see you there, and they were saying, no, I was expecting to see you there. No, we weren't there. We're here. And we're sticking to what we've been told we have to do. And if you peel away all the layers of this, you get the Kingsguard that are obeying orders. They're doing the thing they've been told to do. And what they've been told to do is protect that tower from anyone. Because they may not know. Yes, Ned might be there and say, "Oh, I'm here to help. I'll sort all of this out. Do not worry." They will be thinking, "I can't trust him. This guy was part of the rebel alliance against Rhaegar. This guy's on the other side, and all of these other people here, I've no idea who they are at all. They're outnumbering us." So a conflict does kind of make sense if you buy into this idea that the Kingsguard are following orders, not thinking outside the box, not trying to be the good people doing the right thing. They're doing what they're told. Why do we think that might be the case? Because of this lesson, because of the kind of the feel we get from that fever dream, but also all the evidence that we've had as to how they behaved around the Mad King. The Mad King was doing mad things, horrendous things, terrible things, and not a single one of the King's Guard there seemed to be opposing him until Jaime at the very end. And they all seem to judge Jaime for that. So, yeah, I can understand why can't they just sit down and figure it all out. But when you start to put the building blocks of what we understand about the characters and what was going on, personally, I think it does add up. Um, I will redo my people have asked about this, my Robert's Rebellion playlist. When I get to there, hopefully once you've worked through all of the kind of the logic of what's happened before, it actually the fact that a fight happens makes complete sense, I think. Let's go to question from where did we get to? Purple Feline saying, "Hi, Robert. Happy Thursday. I'm intrigued by the Isle of Faces. It was mentioned multiple times in Book One, so I feel it has an important role to play. Perhaps some kind of new pact between the humans and the Children of the Forest. Will the others make it down that far with their invasion? Or maybe it just seems to be a weirwood hub." Um, so, a new pact. I think I've answered most of those other bits already. A new pact. I like the idea of a new pact, but I do think that there aren't that many Children of the Forest left. And who is it who can actually speak on behalf of humankind in this? Well, their new king, Bran. Does he have to actually sign a pact, or does he just embody it because he is there on behalf of the Weirwood Network as well as humanity? Is he the thing which is joining together the two? That I think for me is the sort of the more symbolism of this rather than a sort of a formal pact between two different sides. You have Bran, who is there, who will be clearly human, but also hooked up to the Weirwood Network, therefore clearly in the Weirwood Network, and him bringing two sides together within him, I think, is the answer. Right, you have. There's a question. Maura Lee. Maura, thank you again. Very generous for saying for Dan the dog. Yes, he's a very happy boy. He's fast asleep now, though. um, James Boros saying, "I wonder if Jaime was at the Tower of Joy, if that would have changed things. It could well have done, but then nobody would have been there in King's Landing to be confronting Aerys. So I'm glad he was where he was because he saved a lot of lives." Andrew K and agree we were just adding it's also a super complicated situation. Lyanna missing, brother and father killed by the father of who she ran off with. It is tricky to navigate. Yeah. So and they are there obeying orders. So to do the thing that they were told they had to do. Alhad saying, in one of your previous live streams, you have indicated that Howland Reed's magic might be effective in bringing down the Tower of Joy. Given that, plus assuming breaking the arm of dawn and creating White Walker, given that, plus assuming the breaking of the arm of dawn and creating the White Walkers, what do you think is the canvas for the old god's magic, and what do you think is its limit? I know this is an open-ended question, given George's writing style, but I hope we can have some fun. So, just in terms of Howland Reed's magic, there is a description. Mira gives a description of his magic. When Bran says, does he have green dreams? And she says, no. But this is the quote: "He could breathe mud and run on leaves, and change earth to water and water to earth with no more than a whispered word. He could talk to trees and weave words and make castles appear and disappear." So that's where the kind of the speculation is about the Tower of Joy and Howland Reed's magic. There's this throwaway line that he could make castles appear and disappear. Now, almost certainly, this is a reference to um, his own castle, which seems to sort of move around and nobody really knows where it is. You can't send ravens there because it's not in a fixed position. So that's almost certainly is what that's a reference to. But is it possible, given the fact that we know what happened with the Tower of Joy after all the events that transpired, we're told, not in a fever dream, this is just Ned's memory, that he tore it down um, brick by brick, basically. He stone by stone, he took down the whole thing. That, even with, he would have had there'll be quite a few horses there. Um, it'll be him and Howland and probably a few other people. Even with all of the things that they've got going on there, that's a massive task to be doing. Is it possible that Howland Reed played a part in doing that with his magic? Yeah, I think it possibly is. So that's where that thinking comes in. I don't think that changes our understanding of the situation one way or the other, but I think it's entirely possible. In terms of your bigger question about what is the scope or the canvas for the old god's magic, and what do you think is its limit? My general take is that the old gods, the Weirwood Network, this is an expression of Westeros. So it's all very nature based. The Hammer of the Waters is, waters. We obviously have the skin changing move, which is inhabiting the animals. The weirwood trees themselves are there. They've got the memories of the earth, basically. So that is what we've got now. This, as a whole, is incredibly powerful. Bran potentially is going to become the most ridiculously powerful being you could imagine, because we know that he can see out through weirwood trees, not just in the present, but in the past. He can see out of weirwood trees, not where he is. He saw out of the Winterfell weirwood tree while he was in Bloodraven's cave, hundreds of miles to the north. We're told that in time he will be able to move beyond the trees themselves. And we're told that, or we're shown that he can affect things in the past. At the moment, in just small ways, but it's going to get at least big enough for the Hodor moment, and maybe even further. So what we've got already is somebody who can go anywhere during space and time in Westeros and affect things. That is hugely powerful. So when you take that as your starting point, then you get skin changes, and skin changes can go into a number of different beasts at a time. They seem to be able to affect the natural world around them. I mean, if we just take the other bits that not castle bits, breathing mud and run on leaves, changing earth to water and water to earth, talk to trees, weave words. I mean, these are things to do with nature. So the headline, I would say, is that it's very important to acknowledge the fact George R. R. Martin likes surprising us with magic. The moment that we think we understand where we are with a bit of magic, or how magic works, or what the limits of magic are, he wants to push it a little bit further. I am almost certain that in the Winds of Winter, whenever we get it, there will be new types of magic that we just have not seen before, that we do not understand. Because for George R. R. Martin, that's the thing about magic, is that uh, it's scary because we don't know what's going on. And he's done this all the way through, because it's been so long since we had a new book. Then we've kind of like, we've banked all of the magic that we've seen so far. We've just got it all logged and labeled and things like that. But when it happened each time, it's like, what on earth is going on here? We start out in book one, not huge amounts of magic at all, but we do get some dragons being hatched and like. Then we start shadow babies? What's that? Seeing things in the fire, bringing people back from the dead, visions of the future. I mean, the amount of bits of magic going on everywhere is just like ramping up and ramping up and ramping up. We will get new things, new types of magic we don't know anything about coming up in the next few books. And that will include things that the Children of the Forest can do, I'm absolutely certain. Let's go to Johnny Seriani saying, "Good morrow, Robert. George R. Martin is such a Tolkien fan. I wonder if the Isle of Faces draws any inspiration from the Legendarium. Are there any places in Tolkien's work that resemble a similar feel to the Isle, if only in plot relevance, if not physically? I noted a few similarities with Lothlorien, a largely hidden, seemingly magical place that is at peace with nature and that a very knowledgeable and helpful character resides at. But due to how due to how the story plays out, the characters we know spend very little, if any, time there. I doubt this is enough to definitively say George used this specifically when coming up with the idea, but what are your thoughts? Does anything similar to the Isle of Faces come up in any other book? So I can't, off the top of my head, think of any specifically Isle of Faces things, but I think the Ents we have to see as a thematic link here. The way that the trees can be a part of this, as sort of protagonists, as a part of this, is, I think, quite important. They, if you remember the Treebeard line, whose side you're on, not 100% on anyone's side, because nobody's truly on my side, I think actually is where the Weirwoods are coming from, because we are, whose side are they on? Well, they're on their own side, and they're hoping that they might be able to work with other people, but that they are on their own, the side of nature, and not chopping down trees and things like that. So yeah, there's the Tolkien clearly loved trees. Um, I think this is. I don't think this is an homage in any way, but there might be a small hat tip here. Let's put it that way. Let's go to Cremarianarino. Probably mispronounced that. Hello, Robert. This is everyone. Hello. Who is on a trajectory to meet Howland Reed? Will he be someone's Master Yoda? Will he bestow Dawn upon John? And who has Dawn? Okay, so who's going to meet Howland Reed? So Howland Reed is in the neck at the moment. He's not left there. But a lot of people are Stark loyalists are all converging there. People like Mage Mormont, for example. Ned's bones have almost certainly made their way now to there. So he very probably will make it. I mean, George R. Martin has said Howland Reed will make an appearance. It's just not yet. Is he going to be anyone's Master Yoda? I don't think so. I think his main role is going to be on giving us a whole lot of the backstory about what happened in Tenny at Harrenhal, things like that. I think he is the person who's going to be giving us all of this backstory. He might get involved in doing a bit of magic or something here and there, but I don't think they're going to be doing any. He's not going to be leading the charge. Let's put it that way. As for Dawn, the sword Dawn is so it's going to be down in Starfall, I think. So quite possibly it's going to be stolen by Gerald Dane, and then it will come into circulation through that. He's probably going to be joining Aegon's Kingsguard, and that's how I think this is going to come into kind of circulation there. I don't think he's the person who's going to be bestowing it on anyone. James Borus. I know George doesn't want it to happen, but I had a thought today that if I had to pick someone to finish this or help him, I'd pick Robin Hobb or Tad Williams, especially as he's good friends with Robin Hobb. Yeah, so he was very clear that the article that I referenced earlier, the James Hibbard one, not the James Hetfield one, the James Hibbard one, he's asked about this. I mean, it's good. Do check it out. It's a really interesting article on a number of issues. And he's asked, George R. Martin is asked, is there a backup plan? If worst comes to worst, if you die, what happens? And his answer is basically then you have an unfinished book. He name checks The Mystery of Edwin Drood, which is the famously unfinished final book by Charles Dickens, who at the time was the most famous author in the world. And it was like, but he didn't finish this book. So that's which led lots of people to try and speculate on how it might have finished and the like. So he said, no, there is no backup plan. He's not nominating somebody who's going to do this. He's not going to do a Robert Jordan and sort of create some notes that he can hand on to someone. It's just going to be not finished. So, given that, I think we should probably not be speculating on this. I would agree with you in terms of I love both Tad Williams and Robin Hobb. He is friends with Robin Hobb. And I have on a number of occasions noted the similarities between particularly the original Fire-Seer trilogy and the sort of the meta A Song of Ice and Fire story. There's Seven Kingdoms, Six Duchies, the bastard son of the heir to the throne, being a skin changer with a bond to a wolf, dragons, undead type zombies invading. The similarities are huge. Yes, that I completely get it. That is, I don't think that's what George R. R. Martin wants to do, so I think we should respect him on that. Paul Whitrock. I can see we are somewhat spoiled for choice this year with fantasy shows. I was wondering if you would be covering HBO's Harry Potter reboot at all. Well, I'm not planning on it. My understanding is that's not till next year. I might be wrong. But yeah, they're certainly filming it right now. And last I heard was, I think, was it Hans Zimmer? They got some impressive person to be doing the music for that. Yeah, it's certainly coming along. Jewel Elson, the super sticker. Thank you very much. I hugely appreciate that. Reflective rambling, picking up a question for Secret Agent. Thank you very much. Where do you think Bran's magic is from? Is it Stark blood? Is it chance falling from the tower? Sorry to backtrack. That's not you can backtrack. It's not a problem. Where's it from? Well, the first Men blood is there. So it's pretty clear that from what Bloodraven says, one in 1,000 of First Men blood are skin changes, 1 in 1,000 skin changes are green seers. So there's a sort of a chance element with that. It is very clear, however, that the bond that the Stark children have with their direwolves is very strong. All of them have that kind of Walker link. George R. R. Martin confirmed it. Sansa would have done as well if a lady had lived long enough. Is that coincidence? I don't think it's coincidence. I think there may well be something in the Starks, given the fact that the direwolf is their sigil. The statues have direwolves next to them. There is a clear link between direwolves and Starks, and yet direwolves haven't been around for a very long time, so we just don't know that, when a Stark and a direwolf spend a long time together, then they form that bond. That kind of makes sense to me. The fact that he has more powers than that, for, I mean, it's the temptation to say it's for plot reasons, but yeah, it comes from his first men blood. It comes from the Starkish heritage, and this is, we're focusing in on him because this is not just his story, but this came incidentally. When you say it's his story, it started as his story. George R. R. Martin has been very clear about this. He's said, as much as we might think that Dany or Jon or Tyrion or whoever is the main character, the first scene he ever thought of was that scene with the direwolf pups. And he thought of Bran. And after that, he thought, oh, okay, so Bran needs to have some siblings to have the other direwolves. That was the thinking, and that it's kind of spiraled out from there, if that makes sense. So this started with Bran. So I think it's always useful that doesn't mean that's where the end of his thought process was, but I think it's always a useful reminder if we're thinking, is Bran really that important? Yeah, it started with Bran. Caius Ballerina, if followers of the old gods have so much power, how did they ever get invaded post-pact? Once the Andals start cutting down weirwoods, why not just never let an Andal ship land on Westeros again? Well, I think the answer here is that this is a slow invasion. To the extent that this is, as I say, I think invasion is the wrong word. This is a slow armed immigration and integration over literally centuries. So over hundreds of years, then there would just be a few here. So they would come, and you don't think of this that this was disjointed kingdoms. There wasn't like a king over everyone who could make big strategic decisions for Westeros. This was lots of individual petty kingdoms here and there, and then one of them somewhere over in the Vale got faced with a raiding party that came and then settled. That doesn't bother anyone else. And then after a while, the next year, another one happened. 5 years after that, then a group of ships came in and took over an area. So it was this, and then they intermarry with someone else, and before you know it, it's this. Oh well, there's now a slightly different community going on over there. That's the way it would have felt. Sometimes there were battles, yes, but a lot of the time it was just going to be like one-offs and here and there. And so it's not if you were in the Reach, you wouldn't, for the first few decades, you wouldn't have even thought about this. You thought, oh yeah, that's a problem they've got over there. We have to deal with the Ironborn over here. They have to deal with the Andals. That's their thing. And so there wasn't a central person who was in charge of all of this. James Boris, Dickens did finish a lot of other books, to be fair. He did. He did write a lot of books, and a lot of them are really rather good. Let's go to. I think I had another question here in the chat. Maybe I didn't. Okay. DV Finest saying, happy to catch you live. It's like Christmas. Well, great to see you. Welcome. Let's go to a question from where have we got up to? Yeldenil. The Green Men remind me of stories about fae folk, fairies, dryads, nymphs, and spirits. They also share similarities with Arthurian legend, what with their antlers and all. I love that visual. In a way, it's more ethereal kind of creature than the other magical beings we encounter in the books, like the dragons and the White Walkers. Do you think we'll get to actually meet them, or will they remain more of a legend, an image to wonder about? And how large is the Isle? How many green men and maybe women could be living there? Okay, so in terms of the Isle, the only description we have got is small. So, I mean, how small is small? In the midst of a massive lake, it could be still a reasonable sized island. I think the implication if you've got a large number of weirwood trees and a specific order of people who are there on the island to protect them, then it can't be teeny tiny, but it's also not. It's not so large as to be significant. You can still describe it as a small island. So that's the sort of in terms of the size. Um, the mystical side, yes, I absolutely agree. It does with the antlers and things. This does feel kind of like Arthurian legend kind of feel, and the Green Man. The idea is very much there. It fits in with all of that. So they are mysterious because we've never seen them, we've never met them, we don't know what they're about. George R. Martin will keep it that way for as long as possible. He likes this. He particularly, if you notice with the others, because we got spoiled with the TV show of seeing so much about the White Walkers that we feel like we understand them now. The others are still a huge mystery. They've only really appeared like, on page 3 times, maybe something like that, 3-4 times. So they're still sort of something that we don't quite understand in the book world, and that George R. Martin thinks adds to the suspense and the mystery and the scariness of it. Now, the Green Men, I think there's a chance we will meet them eventually, so I think some mystique will go, but it will be like when we met some children of the forest. Now, that doesn't mean we understand them just because we met some of them, but it does perhaps give us a chance to demythologize a few bits there. SGH, should Daenerys become queen, might her ancestry back to Egg's wife and old gods' connections cause her to make House Blackwood lords of the Riverlands? Well, quite possibly. I mean, should she become queen, the world will be still racked with civil war and possibly being invaded by the others to the north, Euron doing crazy things to the south. Yes, she will probably name some allies to be ruling different places. If she were, if we just do this huge understanding, maybe she gets to the end of all this and survives and is queen. Who would she make as lords of the Riverlands? Well, probably it would depend on who bent the knee. If the Tullys did not, I doubt she'd give it to the Fleas, but if the Tullys did not, then yes, House Blackwood would be given her family connection, would be an obvious place to go. So, yeah, I mean, theoretically, I like it. In practice, I don't think, although she might give sort of make people the titular this or whatever, then I don't think it's actually going to be a chance to rule the Riverlands. Fighting will carry on the Riverlands all the way through the story, I'm sure. Vampiris, thank you very much. I didn't see a question attached to that. I'll try and see what. Oh, there is one. Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones question. Do you think that the Green Men could be a sort of homage to the dead men of Dunharrow, an isolated ancient group of fighters who, through magic, are tied to a specific location? Possibly, but I think for me, the link to the dead men of Dunharrow is more to do with the Starks being tied to Winterfell crypts. The spirits of Stark lords and kings are drawn there. We know this, and they're stuck there until they do something that they have to do. That feels very much Dead Men of Dunharrow to me. The Green Men depends on what they are. We'll have to wait and see. If they are dead people who are, as I've kind of speculated, who are sort of kept alive by the magic of the Children of the Forest, Cold Hands-esque, then perhaps, yes, there is going to be a bit of an echo of that. Perhaps they could be humans who have been they can't leave, but they have to perform their duties as some kind of penance. I could see it, but I don't think we know enough to be able to confirm that now. Chitara, wait, if Sansa is the new Tomb Raider, is this how they wake up the statues in the crypts of Winterfell? Yeah, I love it. Yes, so Sansa Sophie Turner is the new Lara Croft. If you've not seen, they've released the first publicity photos. She looks good, I think. So we'll wait and see how that turns out. But yeah, strong start. Question from Commander Ray. Hello, Robert. Unrelated to the Isle of Faces. Yes, so now I've got to the end of my Isle of Faces questions. If you want to drop any more questions in the chat, now is a good time. I've got a few broader questions to be answering. Commander Ray, yes, you said you were going to do this. Hello, Robert. Unrelated to the Isle of Faces, what would be the logistics and just the difficulty and outcome if there was a canal dug by House Reed in the neck, creating a new shortcut? So, yeah, this was something on X. Somebody posted this that if the Crannog men built a canal through the neck, it could be like Panama Canal, Suez Canal. It could save ships huge amounts of time, and this would make House Reed incredibly rich, which I thought was great lateral thinking. I appreciated it hugely. So this is the kind of thing I often do videos about, and I'm tempted to do something on something similar to that. But the first point is that they never would. The Crannog men like their secrecy. They like being in hiding. They like the fact that people don't know how to get hold of them. And the neck, they're almost impossible to defeat because they're the only people who know how to navigate it. If you put a whopping great big canal through there, which is large enough to be allowing ocean-going vessels through, in fact, both ways, then you're completely undoing all of your strategic advantage. So yes, you might be able to get a little bit of money from people paying to go through your canal, but you'd lose all of your strategic advantage you had before that. So that, I think, is probably the first point. The second point is that as I understand it, I am not, I'm very sad to say, a canal building expert, but as I understand it, it is possible to build canals through swampland, but it's very hard because of shifting water and very soft ground and things like that. You have to put a huge amount of more than you're just like digging through normal solid ground. This requires a huge amount more effort, which is possible, but would take a very long time. Now, my mind immediately goes actually to the twins, which has got a very similar idea. Building the twins as a bridge across the river took 3 generations for House Ray to do before they could actually start charging people a toll to go over there. We might be talking the same kind of thing, unless they use this fabled magic that Howland Reed and others had. So it would be hard. They wouldn't want to do it anyway. Would people use it? Well, I'm sure some might, but you have to ask, who is it who wants to cross over that bit of land? Traders is the first possible answer. The fact is, the west coast of of Westeros, it's not as good as like the south coast and round to the east. So you have a sort of a main trade routes. You have the cities. You've got White Harbour all the way to the north. Then you've got Gulltown, which is your access into the Vale of Arryn. You've got King's Landing, then you work around to places like Planky Town, and then you've got Old Town, and then your last stop is Lannisport on the western side of Westeros. That's by which time you've sold all of your stuff. You buy things, say, at Lannisport, and then you head back. Now, if you give the shortcut to go through the rather than go all the way around the bottom. Yes, you might help people evade the stepstones, which have got a whole load of pirates in, which people may wish to do if they were just wanting to go to somewhere like Lannisport. But you are heading straight into the waters where the Ironborn are. So you're replacing one danger with another danger. So I don't think they would want to do it. If they did do it, it would be very hard to do. And although, yes, it would certainly help some kind of some people get what they want. The natural trade route fits in everything around the south of Westeros, rather than sort of nipping across the north. You're missing out on almost all of the good places to be trading. So theoretically good, love the thinking, but probably not the best idea. Right, let's go to. Agree with saying they would be wiped off the face of Westeros if they got that many people through their land. Yeah, I mean that's I think the main thing. Let's go to a question from Adam Geets saying, "Hi Robert, a general A Song of Ice and Fire question. I'm sure you probably have answered this before. Can't remember the answer. Who do you think is the third head of the dragon in the story? There are only 3 possible Targaryens remaining who are options: Aegon the Sixth, Bloodraven, or Tyrion. So I'm assuming that you're thinking Jon is the second. Now, this is the point at which we get a little bit abstract, I'm afraid, because we don't know exactly where this has come from. So the 3-headed dragon was Aegon and his wives. They took that as the sigil, the 3-headed dragon, because there were 3 of them. They had 3 dragons. So that's where that comes from. The dragon must have 3 heads. Comes from Maester Aemon. Sort of wakes up when he's in his last days. He wakes up one time talking to Sam and saying, "The dragon must have 3 heads. I would go myself, but I'm getting too old." Which seems to imply what you're suggesting here, which is that he thinks that there must be 3 Targaryens together. For prophecy reasons, it's not 100% clear. We also, when we get that vision that Dany sees Rhaegar in the House of the Undying, he, having got his second child with him, then he says there must be one more. The dragon must have 3 heads, which implies that he also thinks that there need to be 3 Targaryens. So this idea that there must be 3 Targaryens, presumably to be riding 3 dragons, though at the time Rhaegar certainly didn't know that there were going to be dragons. We don't know where it comes from, but probably from a scroll that Maester Aemon and Rhaegar read. Dany, having seen that, the most times you hear this phrase in A Song of Ice and Fire is Dany thinking about it. She comes out of there, she starts talking to Jorah, she's saying, "What does that mean, the 3 heads of the dragon?" And Jorah's just saying, "Well, that was the original 3 Targaryens, obviously. I mean," and she starts thinking, "But 3, does that mean that I need to have 2 other dragons? I've got 3 dragons, so does that mean I need to find 2 people to be like my left and right?" And she then later develops this to thinking there are only 2 people that I will ever trust completely, because the dragon must have 3 heads. And the clear implication, she's then putting herself into the place of Aegon and thinking that she has to have 2 others with her. So that is where we're coming from in all of this. But the technicality is that George R. R. Martin doesn't I think, just right. Here's the prophecy. This is therefore what it has to be achieved like this in order for there to be an end of this and the good guys win. That's not how he works. What he's far more interested in is what people believe rather than the truth of the prophecy. And what seems to be important here is the fact that Dany has come away with this idea. Alaras, incidentally, also comes out with it. He was a very good scholar. So probably there's something written down somewhere. But the key point is that Dany believes that there will be 3 dragon riders. And she's trying to work out who this is, which I think is an under thought through proposition, because when she hears about Aegon the Sixth, her first thought is probably not going to be, I need to kill him and take the throne. It'll be, so maybe this is one of the other 2 dragon riders. So her first interactions with him may well be slightly different, because he's actually going to be thinking, oh, I want one of those dragons. And she's going to be thinking, maybe this is the person who's going to have one of these dragons. So that's an interesting dynamic going forward. So who do I think is going to be the 3rd-headed dragon? I think that it will be left to personal interpretation. I think that you could certainly interpret it as Dany, Jon, and Aegon, but perhaps one of her dragons is going to get stolen, and maybe Euron then has one. Does he become the 3rd head of the dragon, even if he's not on her side? It's possible. So yeah, I don't think it's going to be this straightforward. And I think George R. Martin is going to leave it to our interpretation of how that might have been fulfilled, if it was fulfilled. Count Ballerina, how do you feel about George R. R. Martin saying he was going to kill Sansa? He says he might change his mind. How will this affect her book trajectory? Yeah, so this was the same interview. It was very wide ranging. There was, and I think I probably said it last week. If he'd come out and said any one or 2 of those things on their own, we would happily have spent an entire live stream talking about that thing. And this is one of those things. He just sort of casually dropped in there that he'd originally thought he would have Sansa die. But he kind of liked, I can't remember the exact wording, because he kind of liked what he saw on the show. And so maybe now he will let her live. That's huge news. It does seem to imply that she's not central to the end plot. Her being alive at the end was not necessary for the big plot that he's got planned. She could die, she could live. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing is that this is the first time, I think, that other than a sort of a brief mention of Osha, when he sort of said, oh yeah, I really liked the depiction of Osha there. I'd always imagined her as quite a small character, but maybe I'll be for up in later books. Other than that, I think this is the first major character that we've got where he's actually said, yeah, I might change things on the basis of what happened on the TV show. Which is quite significant, I think. As for what does this do to her character arc, I would caution against over-interpreting it. I don't think she's going to die in the immediate future. I think the clear implication was she was going to die towards the end. Now, that will mean that she can get through, she could even get to be a lady, the Lady of Winterfell, but then die when the others attack. So I think we get really attached to characters, but we have to remember George R. Martin has been very clear, lots of characters are going to die. And you can't have so much of this story building up to, say, the others attacking without some significant characters dying in it. People will be killed. So who's it going to be? If it's not going to be Sansa, then it will be some other character. So it's, yeah. I had many different thoughts about it, but I don't think it affects her overall character arc. It's just whether he makes her one of the people who die at the end or not. Um, Graham saying, I think he was being cheeky about Sansa dying. He might have been, um, but it didn't come across, and it's always hard because if you're not in the room, you don't know exactly how people say stuff. The interview did not come across as him sort of being tongue in cheek and playing with us. He had this real sort of heartbreaking thing about the relationship with the House of the Dragon team, about his own struggles, the pressures he feels writing The Winds of Winter, um, and a number of other like really quite serious things for him. What happens if he dies? You know, there were lots of really serious things there, and I don't think he was really in the kind of like a playful, oh, I might tease you with this little bit of information here kind of thing. So maybe because I wasn't there, but um, it's yeah, it's hard to say. Let's go to Anon42. Off-topic question. I strongly dislike, says Anon42, that Tyrion is a Targaryen theory because it breaks his character journey or arc. If he was a bastard, it justifies, sort of, his family's treatment of him. Tyrion and Jon's conversation at Winterfell is not secretly two bastards connecting. It's two people who are treated like bastards but are actually trueborn. Tywin wants him to be a bastard so badly, but the tragedy is Tyrion is more like Tywin than his other children. Tyrion is likely going to ride a dragon, but that doesn't mean he's a Targaryen to me. Well, whether he rides a dragon, I think is I'm less certain about that. I've said many times this is probably one of those things that I oscillate on the most. Um, Instinctively, I agree with you completely that his story, his arc works so well if he is actually Tywin's son. And he certainly thinks like that. He thinks, yeah, I am you writ small. Jenna, his aunt Jenna, Tywin's sister, she she's very clear. Tywin didn't speak to her for 6 months when she said, you know, Tyrion's the most like you. Um, which seems to imply probably Tywin deep down knew it as well. So yeah, that works for me perfectly. But I cannot pretend that there aren't a lot of Tyrion fire dragon bits of symbolism that are there hugely in book one, the first half of book one, and then increasingly in The Dance with Dragons. Tyrion is associated with dragons in a way that most characters are not. So there has to be some meaning to that. Whether that's just that he's now going to be part of Team Dragon, Team Dany, um, maybe. But the dragony imagery is, I think, very clear for him. So I could go either way on this one. Instinctively, from a narrative perspective, I prefer, as you say, that he is Tywin's son, but I can't pretend that all of that dragony stuff isn't there. Was Fox in Arda saying a question about the Azor Ahai legend? Oh, actually, no, I've just missed one out. Sorry, I'll come back to that. So, Steve the O saying, I think a while ago you may have commented on Bran and Cold Hands, where Cold Hands says, I am your monster. Was this a reference to potentially Bran doing things in the past and creating Cold Hands? Um, and I think that the imagery you're going there is very much kind of the Frankenstein's monster. So the kind of context there is like they've they've got north of the wall. They've been saved by him. He says that I'm going to take you up north to meet the boss, and they're debating what do they do, and Bran is saying you're a monster, and his response is, yeah, you're a monster. So that's the kind of the context, and then Jojen kind of ends it all to say, look, we in for a penny, in for a pound, we've got this far, we have to keep on going north, and we might as well trust him. And end of chapter. So that was the context for this. Is this a hint that he belongs to Bran, because Bran created him in some way? I don't think so in that context. I think the fact that Bran himself is a monster, I think is in terms of what he's starting to do, that I think is more sort of the twist. That if George R. R. Martin's wanting a twist on this line, that's a lot more that rather than he created Cold Hands in the past. Ms. Fox in Arda. So, question about the Azor Ahai legend and parallels to the current story. What if Jon, as the Azor Ahai figure, tempers his first blade by killing Tyrion, a lion, then Nisa Nisa, Dany? Here I'm challenging my own theory, but that would take both Tyrion and Dany out before the others. But it does make me wonder if Dany isn't Nisa Nisa to Jon's Azor Ahai, because he would have to kill her to get his flaming sword, used to end the second long night stream of consciousness. Apologies. Yes, so. The Jess John has Azor Ahai symbolism, Principle's Promise symbolism. Well, he's more Prince of the Promise symbolism. Dany has more Azor Ahai symbolism. So I did do a video years ago, before season 8 of Game of Thrones, where I worked through the visions in the House of the Undying and came to the conclusion that a good case could be made for Jon being Dany's final betrayal and him killing her. And there being echoes of the Azor Ahai Nisa Nisa thing, and perhaps when he withdrew his sword, perhaps it was flaming she's a Targaryen, etc., etc. Perhaps that would be what was going on. And I kind of left it at that. That for me, that seemed to be the most logical interpretation of all of that flurry of visions and sayings and things that she had. So it didn't surprise me on the show when Jon killed Dany, because I thought you can make a case for this from the books. That's it's not a we have to have somebody has to betray her. She has to have another love. So yeah, a lot of these things kind of add up. But Jon killing Tyrion and then Dany, I don't personally think so. Although Tyrion, this is another thing from that George R. R. Martin interview. George R. R. Martin did say about Tyrion, I think he's going to have a tragic end because his entire story is a tragedy. Is a tragic end getting killed by Jon? Maybe. I actually wonder whether a more tragic end for Tyrion is to live on, but say, as has been hinted a few times, kind of gruesome, but what if he lost his tongue and lost the ability to do the thing that he was best at, which is talk? And Jaime lost his hand. He was best at fighting. He couldn't do that anymore. Cersei, big thing in the last book, is she's lost her looks. She considers herself the most beautiful woman in the world. She's now in denial a lot, but she's having to accept the fact that she no longer is. What if Tyrion loses his tongue? So it's I get it and I understand. I think we look too much sometimes for a literal redoing of the Azor Ahai legend. This is a legend. This is from thousands of years ago. We shouldn't be expecting it to happen exactly the same way this time. which isn't to say there won't be echoes. I think there will be echoes, but I think Jon killing Tyrion and then Dany perhaps is a step too far. Carl saying Tyrion ain't a nice guy. Dinklage is too charming, lest we forget. Yeah, absolutely. Agree. Weirwood suggesting that Dany tries to marry Fagon and he takes her power as a betrayal. It's entirely possible. The reason for thinking that Jon might be her love is another one of those visions in the House of the Undying where there's this sweet-smelling blue rose in a chink in the wall, which is all the Jon imagery. So that's why we tend to think at the moment that would work. Added to which he does seem to be her kind of type, this kind of leader, good fighter, like Drogo and Dario. Jon kind of fits into that, bit moodier perhaps than them, but anyway. Martin S. This was actually picking up a question from last time because I didn't have an answer. At my fingertips, you were asking about what is the size of the army, the elf and human army in the War of the Last Alliance of elves and men. What size might it have been when they actually finally reached Mount Doom? So this is obviously a Tolkien question. We don't know. George R. Martin did not give us numbers. The best workings out we can have, and I'm going to rely here, chat, there is going to be an expert on this somewhere. There comes an offhand comment from Prince Imrahil when he looks at the size of the army they're going to be marching east at Mordor, and it's 7,000. And he says, that's barely the vanguard of Gondor at its most powerful. The vanguard, for those who don't know, is the front bit of the army. You've got your rear guard, your vanguard, and the main bit. Now, I'd love expertise from people in the chat. What proportion of the army in medieval times would most likely be the vanguard? Now, I've read anything up to a third. It's definitely not more than a third. You don't put most of your forces in the vanguard, but maybe 15%. And I think you can then take that to work out what the size of the human or the Gondorian size might be, given that this was somewhere around the height of their power. Then you can add in the elves and a few others. If you add all of that together, then I think lots of people have speculated in different numbers. I think 100,000 setting out marching is probably a reasonable mid estimation. And then some will die in the battles outside. There was a very long battle even before they got into Mordor. If it was half that number by then, it wouldn't surprise me. So I'm going to say 50,000. Okay, with that, that's the end of my questions from my patrons. Let's go to the chat quickly. Fagon, this is a Greek weirwood saying Fagon is supposed to be a Targaryen, and the idea of marrying her brother was what she thought before Drogo. Yeah, absolutely. So she would, if when she arrives, I mean, this is one of the dynamics that we don't, as I say, we don't talk about much, because in our minds, if we've thought about it, Danny's going to arrive, see somebody else sat on the Iron Throne and say, I need to get rid of them. And then we remember the things in the House of the Undying where it's like the Mama's dragon and things like that. It's like, oh, yes, so there's going to be an opposition. Her first thought, yes, is she probably going to be in full fire and blood mode at the time, but her thought may well be another Targaryen, another dragon rider. at least she would want to talk to him. She's not going to just like burn him out straight away without anything. At least we were going to get, and that will be a great confrontation. Can you imagine Fagon and Dany meet up? We've already had one person. So we had Quentin. The more I think about this, the more I wonder whether or not George R. R. Martin is actually set. He actually said one of the reasons why we had this Quentin arc, which some people weren't 100% sure why do we have this new POV character, to see him arrive at Meereen, meet Dany, and then die almost immediately. Why did we need that? Perhaps part of this is foreshadowing for what's going to be happening with Fagon and Dany. Not happening in the same way, but someone claiming Targaryen blood meeting her. There's that. Andrew K saying, I think that some innate attraction will be at play for with Jon for the same reason, even before it's revealed. Bran, April may or may not. Bran is already fooling Bloodraven. If Bloodraven knew what Bran was doing, he'd run. Yeah, but Bran is keeping a lot from Bloodraven, it has to be said. Does Sebastian Holden, does Jon fit the role of the sorrowful man assassin? Well, if he did kill Dany, these are big ifs, this is a long way away, then it wouldn't be with a glad heart, let's put it that way. Let's quickly flick through. Agree. Weirwood Squeezy Squeezebox saying Tyrion is his father's worst nightmare. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, good. So I think with that, let's just start to wrap this up. So we'll do a couple more of these Mysteries of Westeros in these live streams, but I will be asking my patrons what they would like me to be covering this year in these live streams. So patrons, keep an eye out. At some point in the next few days, I will drop a question there. So please do, let me know what you think. But next week we will do another one of these mysteries ones, and probably a week after. It's been a while since we've done a Lord of the Rings one, so let's do a Lord of the Rings one. So, patrons, thank you. I always try and thank you as many times as I can. I genuinely mean it. I hugely appreciate your support. Moderators, amazing job as always. Thank you so much. If you're there in the chat watching this live, please do show them a little bit of love. If you're watching this live, by the way, on X or Facebook, hello, I know you're there. At the moment, I'm just taking comments and things from YouTube. I will see whether I can get the technology working. Not the most tech savvy person, but I'll see whether I can figure it out so that we can be doing this proper simul streaming across several places. But I see you, and thank you so much for watching. If you want this ad-free, I mean, I do them live ad-free, obviously. But if you want it ad-free, the audio will, in about 2-3 weeks' time, it will be appearing on In Deep Sleep, which is a sister channel to this, which is me doing this talking, but as a sleep video, no adverts, soothing background music or sounds, and a little bit of visuals. So if you're interested in that, do go and try and check that out. If you are watching this back a little bit later on YouTube, there's appearing somewhere, here-ish, there's a link to other videos that I've done, other live streams I've done appearing somewhere around here. It's the link to Patreon, which is the best way to support me if you wish to do so. Thank you all very much, everyone. I will be back. Keep an eye out on this channel for the not House of the Dragon, Night of the Seven Kingdoms Q&A pre-record, and I will be back this time next week with another Q&A live stream. Okay, so take care, everyone. I will see you again soon.